Sander,
Yes.
tell me, we hear these three letters a lot today. PWA, PW,
Right.
PWA.
I'm getting sick of it.
Yeah, are you?
No.
Thank you very much. Oh, anyways, but tell me, is all PWA or PWA the same?
No, there are flavors. I think in essence, I'll go into that in my talk. There are some fundamentals there that are covered by, I think, every solution out there. Then it comes down to flavors. What kind of technology do I like? What kind of integration do I like? And what kind of e-commerce backend am I using?
So you're trying to say not all PWA is equal?
There are nuances, differences. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay, I'll let you tell us all about it. The stage is yours.
Right, thank you. Right. When I got invited to this event to speak 2 weeks ago, they told me, don't worry, you'll be a third, fourth PWA talk, they'll know everything about it. It's great, but it was also an issue because normally the first 20 minutes of my talk are basically what is PWA, so I had to throw away all of my talks and write a new one. It also gives me an opportunity to do something that I don't do very often. That's really go into details about Vue Storefront, about everything that we offer and that we do. But I don't want to be talking here for 30 minutes about all the features we have. I'm a developer by trade. I really don't want to subject you to any horrible sales pitch or something like that. So I wanted to go into more a bit about the ecosystem around it and not just the product itself. So a little bit about Vue Storefront. We're open source. In open source, I mean we also have a thriving community. We have 5K GitHub stars, which doesn't mean a lot. You don't really buy anything for it. It does mean that 5,000 people decided that we're interesting enough that they want to follow us, that they want to have updates on what we actually do. And even better, we have 2,100 members in our Slack group, developers, merchants, agencies, and so on, that daily talk about Vue Storefront. We have 30 modules that we know of that are built by community members that they're actually giving out on GitHub for free. And we have contributions to our platform from over 6 continents. Sadly, Antarctica is a bit lacking behind, but 6 continents are actively contributing to our code base. That translates into, in our last release, 2 days ago, 1.11, 200 fixes done just by the community. We still did some work, but 200 fixes were done by the community. These were not only bug fixes, but they were also new features, for example. So that really shows us that we have a community that cares and that wants to interact with us, and that's something special for us. Another topic is our backends. We can connect to a little over 10 backends at the moment. Not all built by us, also built by the community. We ourselves maintain the Magento 1 and 2 integrations. We maintain the shopware integration that we built by them. But for example, our community built Odoo, PrestaShop, WebSphere, AP Server, Hybris. So a much broader system than just Magento. We have integrations with Agen, with Stripe, with Prismic for content, or Contentful, or Nosto for personalization. So it's not just that the product of Vue Storefront, but you can also add on top of it. And we have partners. In 25 countries, we now have 50 partners that want to go through trainings and that really want to start implementing Vue Storefront for their customers. And that is something we're quite proud of. And that led so far to over 40 live implementations that we know of. Each day we find new implementations out in the wild. It's an open source product, so often we don't really know who is building what. But some really fascinating cases we already saw coming by. And we have partners that have been doing 2 or 3 implementations already and really are becoming experts. So the goal of Vue Storefront is to make PWA a commodity. as Gleb said before, right now it's cutting edge. It's very innovative. It still takes some guts to maybe get into it. But what we rapidly see, at least over the last year, that not just us, but the whole community around it, all the other PWA vendors, they're becoming more and more mature. Magento is becoming more mature in it. If you Storefront really wants to go the extra mile to make sure that it is a commodity that you can count on, and you no longer have to think about all the edge cases that you might need to cover, you can start to innovate on top of PWA. So we do this by providing a very stable platform. We do this by building powerful tools on top of that platform. And we do that by actually sharing the knowledge that we gained over the years of mobile development and PWA development with the community to make sure that you really know how to use these tools and platforms. And we do that with merchants, agencies, and technology providers, because we really think that PWA cannot be a success if one of these three doesn't have buy-in into this. Because I can have a beautiful platform, and I can even have agencies that are implementing it, but if I have no payment service providers that want to integrate with it, well, you kind of need to have payments to do e-commerce, right? So that's why we invest extra time into going out to agencies, going out to technology providers, partnering up with them, making sure they understand the value of PWA. So the platform. Let's talk about a bit of the basics of Vue Storefront. So, like I said, most of the PWA solutions out there have pretty much the same thing. So we have the PWA basics as a standard, right? Where we're offline available, we are discoverable, you can install us on a device by tapping add to home screen. These are the things that you can expect from any solution out there, and we have them. Then we went out and we started to look at the kind of technology that we want to use. Going a little bit back, Vue Storefront is built by an agency in Poland, Divante, and it's actually started as a customer project. So this was built as something that we really needed, something that we were missing in our ecosystem. We tried a couple of JavaScript frameworks, for example, and we really found that Vue.js was easy to learn as both a JavaScript developer and as a full stack developer. We are platform agnostic. I'll go a little bit more into that, but that was very much one of the fundamental things that we wanted to do. And we want to have a ready-to-use integration that covered all the basics. So you have a product page, you have a checkout, you have a customer section, etc. Because we want to make sure that the moment you install this on top of your shop, you can start to add value to the installation. You can start to build features, you can start to improve your design and your interaction. So about the platform agnostic part, it's a decision. It's not a requirement for PWAs. Scandi PWA, for example, integrates with Magento. We integrate with a couple more platforms. Why we did that wasn't because we wanted something that just works out of the box with any backend, because it doesn't. There's always edge case, there's always domain-specific issues that you need to resolve with any platform, right? Because Shopify works a lot different than Magento or AP Server or you name it. And the moment that you start to all throw that into one pile, you're not taking the best of each platform to use it. What it does mean is that we're learning from different platforms. We're not just looking at Magento. Magento has great ways to do stuff, but we're also looking at how Shopware solves something or how BigCommerce solves that. And then we bring that back to our solution. And we can implement that and we can give Magento users the benefits of all those platforms. And I think that's a very strong point that we have. So we can start using best practices that weren't previously known in the ecosystem of Magento. And we can easily integrate those because we are not depending so heavily on the backend. We have an abstraction layer between the backend and the frontend. And there are some benefits here into integrating directly into the back office. when you look at your organization, to your application landscape, often Magento sits between the customer and all your operational processes, right? Because when you start to grow, you might not be doing your warehousing directly from Magento. You actually might have a WMS. For your finances, you might have an ERP. And for your customers, a CRM. And we have many more of these three-letter acronyms that we're using. So what we want to do is make sure that we bring those back-end processes more closely to the front end and limit the amount of integration effort that is actually needed, and also limit the complexity, because converting anything that comes from your ERP system first to Magento and then to your front end actually adds complexity, subtracts from whatever solution you are using, and really holds back on what they can actually offer. So that looks a little bit like this. We have on the right a Magento website. In this case, they're using Vue Storefront. And although we might see one page, we're actually seeing different components. We're seeing for the price, for example, an integration with Odoo, which is an ERP system. We might not actually be using Magento for that because we have dynamic pricing based per customer. And Magento doesn't really do that. We might be using Magento as a transactional engine, right? Because what Magento really does well is transactions and having campaigns on those transactions, for example, or vouchers, or etc. For our product details, we might want to use Akinio, because why do you want to have, I don't know, 40 attributes in Magento if you can just pull it directly from the tables that you have in there? And then for the recommendations or the cross-sells, we might want to use Nosto, because they know our customer better than that a traditional Magento cross-sell could do. And for the content, we might want to use Contentful, because static blocks in Magento are just a very painful experience in general. So here we can see that we are actually using all the benefits of the systems that we bought to, and bring them directly to the front end. So that's kind of why we use this middleware layer. We have the Vue Storefront app, we have the Magento backend and other, I hope it's visible, and other sources such as WordPress or an ERP system. And in between we built a middleware layer that is a very thin application. Oh, yeah, no. So the benefits are extensibility. The middleware is very simple. Pretty much every developer can write in it, so it's easier to integrate solutions. There's less load on the underlying system, because if you're visiting your category page or your product page, it's never hitting the backend, right? We fetch the data from Elasticsearch, which is a flat index, let's say it. We might hit the cache, we might hit Contentful, but your Magento application is doing nothing, which is less server cost, which is perfect. And there's a faster time to market. I'm not saying that PWA integrations are easy. What I am saying is that once you have it set up, you only have to deal with the front end when you want to integrate, for example, Nosto or Contentful. You don't have to go through Magento, for example. And when you want to swap something out, again, you only have to do that in the front end. So now the tools. We have many. I highlighted two, of which I'm quite proud. The first one is Storefront UI. This one is a project that was done by one of our core developers. And what he saw was that there was a real struggle with templating in general. And in JavaScript, you have this wonderful technology that's called the UI library, where you can say, I have these elements, such as a buy button or a credit card field, or you name any of the myriad of elements that we see on every shop, and you can separate that from the way how you present them. So there can be a small layer of colors, of branding on top of that. So we want to implement that. Then we wanted to take all of the extensive UX research we have done for mobile, not on PWA just, but also before that time on responsive. And we wanted to add that to our standard template. And we wanted to make sure that things are reusable. So for example, as an agency, there might be a couple in this room, you know that for each customer you have this one banner module that you like to use. Now it's possible to make those reusable components that you can implement for customers that easily integrate with their branding. So it's a time saver as well. And we used Google's UX playbook. Google did a lot of research on UX, and they came up with this method called atomic design, which we implemented into this Storefront UI. And there's actually a video that might or might not work of a minute that explains it a lot better than I can ever do.
Hi, I'm Svetlana, the designer of Storefront UI library, the one of its kind, based on Vue.js and inspired by Google Retail Playbook. I've always been obsessed with building smooth online shopping experience, and the Storefront UI became my solution. Mobile has slowly overtaken desktop as users' favorite platform, so I've taken an entirely mobile-first approach. Imagine I was designing for a native app, keeping in mind that there are some features which aren't popular on desktop but can be a killer app on mobile, like drag and drop to the cart, dynamic menu, bottom bar navigation, and a whole lot more. With Storefront UI, you can make stunning e-commerce shops with 100% customizable components. I was following atomic design methodology, providing contextless atoms that you can use in any way you want. So start easily changing any aspect of provided components and use them to make highly conversational shops, and not only. Storefront UI, the one of its kind.
So she explains it a lot better. What we did is we went back to the basics, and we didn't just look at what elements we needed on the web page, but we actually looked at what kind of an interaction we would have with those elements. And we started from there. We started to look at where should the buy button be? How should that buy button respond when you're only using your thumb and not sitting behind the desktop computer using a mouse? That's a whole different kind of interaction that you have. And then we started to build Storefront UI with these new innovative ways of building JavaScript front ends. And it still works for desktop as well. So we also optimize it for desktop as well as mobile. And the second tool we set up, which comes now, yes, is a hosted version. What we saw is that a lot of implementations were struggling with the DevOps side. As a developer, I can set up a simple server, but when we're getting into Kubernetes and to containerization, it tends to get a little bit more complex. So we set up the best integration that we could. We containerized every little task, and we made sure that it was extremely scalable. So even when you're running your campaigns or running a TV ad, you have uptime, and your development team doesn't have to worry about DevOps. So that was something that we do to enable people to actually use this, right? We're still happy to partner with you to set up your own hosting. We actually worked with Byte, Hypernode by Byte recently to have Vue Storefront in a one-click setup there. We want to make sure that it's easy to work with this, and again, to make it a commodity instead of you having to struggle with how to set up the very basics of it. And then, lastly, the knowledge. You can create great tools, but if nobody knows how to use them, they're pretty useless in general. So we started to do events. Not only Vue Storefront events, but especially PWA events. We have our own Meet PWA concept that we do with partners, where we invite speakers from us, but also speakers from Magento, for example. Ben Marks and James Zetland were there to speak. But also Google has been there, Contentful has been there, Prismic has been there, and they explain what you can do with PWA and how can you get the most benefits from it. We have hackathons in different countries. Last week I was in Paris to do a hackathon there. With the agency that built Zadig and Voltaire, for example. So we see that there's a need to educate, and we see that there's a need to educate also on a free level. It's something that you can't always charge money for. And all this research that we did into best practices is also something we wanted to share. So that can either be a Magento 1 migration, for example. We're working with some customers that are still Magento 1, need to move to Magento 2. What we actually do is we put View Storefront first on top of it, and then behind the scenes, they can slowly migrate to Magento 2 when they're ready for that. But also unique use cases. With Staples, they used to have a native app, with which you can scan your barcode or actually take a picture of the product of the case and then have it added to cart. We work with them to make that into a PWA to have less investment into native apps. Or with Zadig and Voltaire, for example, to set up a POC to make sure that they can first test the power of PWA and then move forward. And all the research that we did into mobile UI UX, for example, with coming out with Storefront UI. So here, for example, we see the visual search of Staples and some basic understandings in mobile ergonomics. So we did research into how far can you actually go with a thumb. We dove into the research that was already there, and we came up with the best practices on how to make sure that you can reach everything on your screen. So here, for example, we see a new way to go through a sign-up form where you don't have to scroll to a form. Every question is just put under your thumb, and it's a very small move you have to make to actually answer a question. Or how to prioritize content on the screen. You might want to put a banner all the way on top that people don't want to click on, but you might want to have your actual navigation, for example, lower on the page where your thumb can reach this. I think we're working with Happy Socks or Milantia on how to tell a story on the homepage, because that is your prime real estate where you can really draw a customer in and give them an experience instead of just pushing them to shop directly. And so here we innovated a little bit with the way you navigate through the catalog, for example, with swiping, with a scrolling feeling. And it's less, on the responsive sides, when you scroll, it tends to be less fluent, let's say it. On PWA, we see we can make that a much better experience. And we do this through ebooks. We publish about a book per month, I would say, different topics. Two of them are, for example, our PWA book, which is basically 2 years of research that we put into this book on how to do marketing around it, on how to do the rollout, design, etc., even hosting. And, for example, on how to leverage microservices in your headless setup to quickly scale, for example, and how that would hold up when you also have Magento in your ecosystem, right? You don't want to go from Magento all the way to microservices. There are steps in between that you can do. So if View Storefront is more than a product, I wanted you to see that you would be buying into an ecosystem when you work with us. And I want to thank you for your time.